Hello and welcome to Open Source Underdogs YouTube live stream, the second ever episode. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is the second episode. As I mentioned, this is a special episode that we're holding in right before FOSDEM 2025. The topic of the discussion today is the DPGA and MOSIP at FOSDEM. Our guests today are Ramesh Narayanan, CTO of MOSIP, and Balaji Ayodaji. He's a tech evangelist at the DPGA. So welcome, guys.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
Okay, let's start with a quick round of intros. Balaji, tell us a little bit. You're relatively new to the DPGA. I looked on LinkedIn. It says you've been there a couple of months. What's your role at the DPGA, and sort of what was your journey getting there?
Yes, sure. Nice to chat with you, Mike and Ramesh. The name is Balaji, as you rightly mentioned, and I'm the DPG evangelist and technical coordinator at the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And it's a bunch of words, and I've had people do what Mike just did and call it tech evangelist variations of that, but that's pretty much fine. But the short version is that I'm responsible for coordination amongst DPG product owners. And I mostly leverage my background in open source and my technical background to assess DPG applications, the entire process behind that, improving the process, and likewise building relationships with DPG product owners, ensuring that it's a thriving community for them. And one of such reasons is the FOSDEM happening next week, which is why we're also having this live streams. And it's been really great working at the DPGA and trying to move forward on our agenda to accelerate the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals by facilitating the discovery, development, use of, and investment in digital public goods. And I'm super excited to chat with you all today.
Okay, thanks, Balaji. Ramesh, it's an honor to have you on the live stream. And why don't you tell us, before we dive into MOSIP and all that, just tell us a little bit about how you personally got there. What was your journey?
It's been an interesting journey. I discovered my first computer in college, and I think there was no looking back from that point of time. So I've been into building products and solutions, and with kind of drive to really create impactful solutions. So I did that as part of many organizations and startups, and in fact founded a couple of my own startups also. One was focused on getting banking into the rural sector in India, and another was to help people find jobs. So been trying to do that, and it's serendipity that I happen to be at the same place where somebody was looking for folks to architect and build MOSIP. So I just grabbed it with both hands. It's awesome. Something that's at a very global scale and very exciting.
Yeah, and we're going to hear more about MOSIP. So the goal of this live stream is to help some people out there who want to attend FOSDEM, but maybe can't get to Brussels next week. And so, to tell you a little bit about my journey as becoming a DPGA product owner, I attended a conference, heard about DPGs, and looked into it and said, oh, this is a great thing. We can sort of register our product and make it, known that it's safe for use or for consumption for government infrastructure. So it just made immediate sense to me. But let's say maybe I was a more skeptical product owner and I didn't quite know why I might want to register. Balaji, what would you say to a product owner? Like, what are some of the advantages of registering with the DPGA and so you can call yourself a digital public good?
Yeah, sure. I could just give a short background of what that even means, just in case someone listening, of course, doesn't have quite some context on what digital public goods are. Generally, we define digital public goods as open source software, open standards, open data, open AI systems, and open content collections that one adhere to privacy and other applicable laws and best practices and does no harm and help attain the SDGs. And these three qualities is what separates every other open source project from digital public goods. And we often say that digital public goods are open source projects, but not all open source projects are digital public goods. And this definition, for example, is operationalized through the DPG standard, which is like a set of 9 indicators that determine what becomes a digital public good. And as you rightly mentioned earlier, Mike, the first main core benefits that comes from being a DPG is the credibility you get from being known to comply with the DPG standard. The standard itself is something that is being stakeholdered by the DPGA Secretariat, and the Secretariat itself is like the team that manage the DPG registry, the DPG standard, but the DPGA itself is like a Digital Public Goods Alliance, and what that means is that it's an alliance of like member organizations, right? So we have like governments amongst us, we have multilateral organizations, there are companies from the private sector, and then NGOs and CSOs, and all these different organizations are organizing activities around the vision and strategy of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, which is pretty much what I mentioned earlier around like identifying the discovery of like new DPGs, the use of it, and the investment in those digital public goods. So we have members across different governments in different countries, and I mean, to become a member, you need to have some roadmap activity around like usage of DPGs or some form of scaling DPGs. Like there are many activities going on around that. So the first main core benefit is that you get some credibility that you adopt, you comply with some DPG standard, and we are actively promoting that standard amongst our broad global audience, ensuring that it gets that endorsement, and this is very useful for open source projects. The second main core benefit is the fact that this gives you a bit of the visibility and discoverability. We have the DPG registry, which is where we list out all the digital public goods from the different categories I mentioned earlier. And yeah, you can find some information about the DPG itself, what they're doing, how they are aligning with like some certain SDGs, some of the assessment we've done on different core parts of what makes them DPGs. But more than just the listing on the registry itself, we do share that data with also partner catalogs like the Digital Impact Exchange, there's UNDP Digital X. So there's a broad like marketplace of like potential implementers actually sourcing for digital public goods. And many years ago, this wasn't what the case was. And we built that system where we make DPGs more visible in different target areas. And connecting that to another point would be that we actively advocate for digital public goods. And there are different like campaign areas where we are actively involved in. For example, there's 15 and 5, there's the DPGs for climate, there's DPGs for DPI. So there are different campaigns based on different focus areas, and DPGs relevant to those also get like opportunities to be involved in different community of practice, high level events like FOSDEM that would be at next week, and likewise also reports. And the more important one, which is like, it's usually a chain of each of these things, because more of the benefits you get from being the DPG is being part of the DPG community, part of the DPG ecosystem. And the reason why we're all on this call today is because we met each other through this process. And I know Marinesh would also share a bit more about the work they're doing at MOSIP. And last week you had 3 DPG product owners, right, Mike? And they also did share a bit about the work that they are doing. So more on that is that we connect you to like relevant resources, opportunities that we are also creating, and that also the DPGA members are working on. As I mentioned earlier, we do have like a bunch of members across different countries who are doing different work around digital public goods. And this is an ecosystem that has been evolving over the years, and we do that connection amongst ourselves. And we also have the DPG product owners community, which is like every product owner building digital solutions across the globe. And each of them have different experience levels. As you rightly mentioned, Ramesh is leading MOSIP, which is like one of the largest digital public good that we have. That's quite some experience there. And we also have other, maybe smaller scale open source projects that are digital public goods. And there's a lot of experience sharing that happens in this kind of interactions that we have through our community calls, through interactions that we have. So there is a lot of potential for growth for digital public goods when they are in the ecosystem, either through the awareness that we give them, through the networks that they build with other digital public goods and product owners. So it's a whole mix of many things that starts from joining and being a part of the community, and pretty much just leveraging whatever exists in the DPG ecosystem based on the goals of your project. And I say often to DPG product owners that many digital public goods have different needs. It's not the same for all digital public goods because they are different levels, different scales. And the idea is wherever you are, you connect with other G2 public goods product owners and leverage that. And we likewise do that and provide you with more opportunities around that. So that's kind of a rough down, and I hope I've been able to convince
That was a
everyone
big
listening.
let me try and summarize and see if I got all this correctly, and then we'll go to Ramesh to tell us about MOSIP. So advantages for me as a product owner was, well, the community. That's actually the part I personally like the best, because I feel like I get to meet a lot of people I wouldn't otherwise meet. Normally I'm just do identity and security, cybersecurity stuff. So for me, the community's been the most fun part. And that's why I'm looking forward to FOSDEM, because it's actually even more fun to meet people in person. So if you're in the Brussels area or you can get there, please come and visit us. It's completely free. There's no badges at FOSDEM. There's no registration. There's no posters. There's no help. You just have to find your own way to Building H and look for our stand. But it's super fun, and the food is great, and the food trucks are great. So if you're in Brussels, please come visit us in person and check that community out. But okay, so that was the last one. The first one you mentioned was sort of the credibility that companies will get by saying they've been vetted by this, DPGA according to a standard. The second one was discoverability through the registry. Community was third, and I feel like I was missing the fourth. Which one am I missing?
Yeah, the fourth one was mostly around the networks and opportunities amongst the alliance of members.
Okay, cool. Well, no, I think that was a great comment. Ramesh, you've been waiting there patiently. You have a fascinating story. MOSIP has been around it's probably one of the, I don't know the history, but I bet it's one of the first DPGs in the movement. So you have an interesting perspective of how that's evolved. I'd love to hear about MOSIP, but maybe you could preface a little bit about and just give us share some of that historical background about how the DPGA come around and how did you first get involved with it? Maybe were you there?
Yeah, I was there on the fringes, but I was busy building MOSIP itself. So they have done a great job of whatever they have attempted to do so far. And getting to MOSIP, our story is like we were born out of a need, and we had our first customer, Morocco, who wanted a digital identity system for their usage on the signing on the dotted line even before we started building MOSIP. It was born out of the need for governments to be able to have solutions that they could own and maintain. So they were looking for good open source platforms that are supported, had friendly licenses, and gave them a lot of comfort, right? So unfortunately, at that point of time in the world, a lot of governments were worried about vendor lock-in or solutions that adhere to standards and so on, because they were getting a lot of proprietary stuff that left them in cul-de-sacs. So that was where the need was felt, and we were born. And so as a result, we had a lot of the good things built in as principles right from the outset. We said we would look at being friendly, open source, take care of good data handling principles, all the things that governments require in good solutions out of the box. So digital ID principles from ID4D were taken, and similarly, good digital development principles also were taken, and then we try to incorporate all of that into the product that we were working. We engaged with DPGA even as the DPG standards were evolving, so that we got in that early. So we have had to submit our responses and even our queries, and I think some of them probably informed the questionnaire that they had and made changes also. And it was an interesting take from an external party, helped us validate the things that we were actually trying to do, and we were very glad for getting that validation. We are not the first DPG around. There have been many other DPGs even before the term DPG was coined, but we were one of the early ones to get onto the DPGA's registry and involved in the process. And we actually are looking at, as you said, Mike, earlier, looking at GovTech in some sense, right? Helping governments find technologies for digital transformation initiatives, and things that will help them continue for decades in their journey without having to worry about getting locked out or using bad technology and so on. So that's where the whole ethos of DPG comes in. And I think FOSS, free open source solutions, have been playing a big role there. So it's a derivative of that. That's how I view DPGs. And it's important that somebody takes this and goes and talks to governments and the importance of it. And I think DPGA has been doing a wonderful job of that messaging being taken to the government so that they wake up and know that there is an option that will get them in the right path.
Ramesh, I'd love to leave you in the hot seat for a second and ask a follow-up question. I feel like in some cases, DPGs have the ability to keep the commercial vendors honest. There is a real value to commercial vendors agreeing to patch software for a period of time. And it might even be very expensive in some very esoteric, like small markets. And that could be fair because that might be the fair cost of innovating that software. But I feel like DPGs have a potential to sort of keep the players honest so that there's not exorbitant, prices for commodity infrastructure. And I think MOSIP has actually demonstrated this in a couple of areas. I'm thinking specifically in sort of the digital ID area that was sort of dominated by like Thales and IDEMIA. But do you think that that's true, that DPGs can sort of make sure that certain markets are more competitive?
Absolutely, I agree with you. And in fact, the idea is not that DPGs be the only option. DPGs are one of the options available. Private sector innovation, local product creation, custom solutions built by departments, all of these have their own place, right? And they are welcome. But they have to be effective, and everybody has to play inside the sandbox, right? And I think defining the sandbox better is something that has happened as a result of DPGs emerging as good options.
Yeah, and so Balaji, one of the challenges of software, and we were chatting before, and you told me you've been in the software industry for some time, is that it's not really the software that people want, but it's the commitment to continue to innovate, to continue to patch. And how do you see, and so part of this is a challenge to not only get these products to register, but to get them to flourish. What do you see are some of the challenges of after registration happens, after you convince product owners to get going around sort of creating sustainable funding models around open source, and how can the DPGA help there? Or maybe it's even out of scope with what the DPGA is set out to do.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And that's one thing we are actively and always thinking about. And it's also one of the benefits of being a part of the DPGA, because when you're DPG itself, when you join the ecosystem, we're finding ways to also help you grow, right? And that's something you benefit as being part of the community. And sustainability is definitely one conversation that has been ongoing for quite some time now. It's being solved in different areas, and there's still more work to be done. And that's why the DPGA is glad to be an alliance of members where we have more people who can do the work. The DPGA Secretariat itself won't do all the work, but we do have members who are actively doing work around that. And when you think of sustainability, it's mostly around the project itself and the people behind the project. And there's a whole nuance around how that works. And practically for due to public goods product owners, when they join the program, we try to understand better where are the key areas that they need help with. And for most projects, it's probably not even funding. For some, it's funding. And as much as those projects align with the needs of potential donors and also organizations that could help scale that, we do those connections. And that has happened over the past years for many projects. And for the projects in other areas, we connect them with like experts that could help with just like different key areas. So for example, we have projects where the scope of sustaining the project was around like technical contributions. How do they keep the community active? How do they keep contributing back to the code of the project itself? And for many projects, it's mostly stuff around how do we, position ourselves to be seen by governments. I like that Ramesh mentioned that earlier, that, we're able to position DPGs in front of potential implementers around government stakeholders. areas. And for most DPGs, that just means learning more about how to, tell stories, solutions engineering tactics around stuff like that. And we do provide those knowledge sharing and trainings around how that could be done through multiple ways that we meet both virtually and not virtually. So it's an ongoing conversation, and definitely it's something that is very key because, I mean, if we don't sustain the project itself, there wouldn't be any DPGs anymore, right? The aim is not just for open source projects to become DPGs, it's for them to become DPGs and for them to thrive. And this would happen in multiple ways, both by when more people know about them, when more people actually use and implement them, and then more people give back to the digital public goods itself. So that's something that's been happening across multiple DPGs and across different campaign areas for the different focus areas that both donors and DPGA is aligned on.
Ramesh, any thoughts about if you're talking to a new open source project owner, not in your space, would you recommend becoming a DPG, or when do you think is a good time that a company, a project should say, oh, my goals align with the DPG, and for this reason, maybe I should consider it? Do you have any thoughts?
Absolutely. I think if they are looking at some kind of a long-term, if they have a clear long-term plan of being around and providing the solution and supporting it, that's I think a bare minimum criteria with which they have to start. And if they are in the GovTech space or in the public-private partnership space, where the target is basically delivering infrastructure solutions or point solutions in the government to people space, and those are the kind of projects which would be good candidates for having, and they should be willing to let others actually take it and run with it. That's also a very key expectation, because reaching everyone everywhere and making them your customer is not going to happen all by yourselves, but by way of a community actually coming into play. And so if somebody is looking at a revenue model and trying to make something and try to get governments to become customers and pay, it may not be a very easy journey as such. But if they want adoption and then find models for revenue through support, certification, and so on, and there are a lot of options that can be actually looked at. And given the current focus on sustainable digital goals and DPGs playing a role on that, there is also some funding environment available where they can get additional support from philanthropic capital. At MOSIP, as Bolaji said, we are a large project, and we have some 125 repos, 6 million lines of code, and 400,000 contributions. And all of that has come either through philanthropic funding or through pro bono contributions from people who are willing to do it, right? And it takes a lot of passion to keep this going, because sustainability, revenue models, all these things are secondary to some of the sustenance goals and helping the digital transformation journey itself, right? So if somebody is in the mindset for all that, where there is a little bit of business and then there is a little bit of giving back, I think that's when they would fit right into the DPG zone.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of comments here because I can't resist. There's, different types of open source companies. For example, in Silicon Valley, we have VC-backed open source companies like Confluent and HashiCorp, like uber successful companies who've created uber successful products like Terraform, or Kafka. And there's monetization strategies there and goals. And what I've found interesting as somebody maybe being an American running a high growth tech company versus maybe a different type of open source projects is that the goals of sort of VC backed tech companies are very high growth. And that sort of drives all the decisions. Whereas a different type of open source project who is pursuing these longer term projects might need a different type of model than basically wanting to grow 50 to 100% per year. So for me, it's been interesting to see sort of that friction of, well, open source software can be really expensive to build. It's really expensive to build Terraform. But to me, it's like, well, what's the sort of, there's a Venn diagram of maybe some projects which can't be written by let's say a donor funded open source project, but there's other projects that we need to be funded in order to keep a competitive landscape. And there's an interesting friction there, or friction or sort of give and take in the open source ecosystem that makes it very confusing for people. Ramesh, if I could just give you the floor for one more minute. MOSIP is a really great project. You mentioned the commits. That, to me, that's always the real sign of a project, is like not how many stars, but how many commits. So I like that lines of code measure. But I think the MOSIP identity space, it can be also hard for people to understand, because I think identity is a big area that breaks into a lot of different facets, and it's hard for people to understand which business problems a product actually solves in the identity space. Maybe just at a high level, could you tell us, like, what are some of the main business problems that you see MOSIP was solving for countries?
Yeah, maybe I should have started with that in the first place.
Sure.
Yeah, but here it goes. We are actually trying to get people access to services, like at a fundamental level. In order to even participate in a digital economy, they need a presence, they need some identity, right? And that identity requires plenty of assurance if it is for critical services such as banking, telecom, because there are FATF norms which are guiding the processes behind these activities. And even otherwise, if you don't have a piece of official looking paper, more often than not, you don't get access to many of the services, right? So it's important to have that. So what our focus is to help governments issue trusted digital identities for people to participate in the digital economy. We are starting digital because we want to leapfrog paper and other forms of identity and directly get into something that's digital but can be possibly printed and held in physical form also. Right? So that is our core. And we want to also make sure that it's not just that people get identity, but they're able to use it very effectively in many use cases. So the consumption of identity and the verification of identity is also something that we are trying to provide tools for various use cases to utilize for rendering services unto people. That's the core focus. Large service provider would be the government itself, and but it doesn't end there. There could be private sector players also offering services to the same people using these identities, like telecom and banking were examples of that, but there could be much more that one could do. And we are trying to do this with state-of-the-art technology. Governments and people deserve the best and the latest, and that's one of the things that drives us to keep innovating and delivering cutting-edge solutions even as they are evolving. And we work with various standards development organizations also to look at the latest specifications and try to conform our products to that, to ensure that it's forward-looking and it's compatible. We can be replaced with other options. We are not here to lock anybody in, but we are here to provide a good solution which is standards compliant. So that's our general ethos, and that's what we are working toward.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go to last thoughts. We're trying to keep this short. I know people have only limited time to watch YouTube, and I don't even know if I want to encourage that. Balaji, why don't we go to you? Last thoughts, next steps, or?
Yes, definitely. And I think most of what Ramesh just shared about MOSIP is the kind of stories and the kind of work we want to amplify at the DPGA itself. And we look out for more projects that could be a part of this ecosystem. And our goal, as always, is to amplify like the discovery, the use of digital public goods. And we've been doing this for quite some years now, and we look forward to seeing digital public goods being used as part of countries' digital public infrastructure, and seeing these projects actually solve problems around us, because there's a lot of problems and there's a lot of tech, and as software engineers, that's the only contribution we could offer in that sense. And you have people in other fields offering the expertise that they have to solve those problems, right? And this is one thing we encourage engineers to do, is to build solutions that solve problems around them. And even better is like projects that are always aligned towards the SDGs. And yeah, we look forward to seeing how much value DPGs can get at FOSDEM next week. And we would also likewise have a side event on Friday by 18:30 100 hours. So if you're an engineer building projects in the civic tech, social impact, public good space, come around, have some chat, meet people like Mike and a couple of other DPG product owners who will be there to learn more about the work, see how you could build synergies amongst people with their experience building the kind of stuff that you do, and how the DPGA itself can help amplify the work that you're doing. So yeah, we look forward to more of that.
Awesome. And Ramesh, last thoughts?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Mike. And yeah, I would like to say, for those developers who want to work on impactful projects, we have loads of opportunity. Please feel free to look us up on GitHub. It's MOSIP, MOSIP. And we have an active community also. You can reach out to us. And for countries who are interested in identity solutions, we have an event coming up in Manila where you can participate and discover all about us. Please do write to us if you are interested.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're pretty much right on time. We are gonna, I guess, special announcement. This is the second episode of this live stream. I had done around 75 episodes of open source Underdogs, but when we're moving to this new live stream format, which is easier for us to produce, I'm actually going to collaborate with Emily Omier. We're going to collaborate on a live stream, and that's going to show up on this stream after that. So we will be coming back, but we're going to strategize at FOSDEM on what to do. Like Balaji said, please come out to the DPGA side event if you're there. Stop by the stand in Building H. Yeah, it would be great to meet everyone. Thank you to the guests and thank you to the audience, and we'll call it there.